Good morning, everybody. Happy Wednesday. We have an amazing show for everybody today. What do we have, Krystal?
Indeed we do. We've got Brianna Joy Gray on. She's going to be talking about how popular $15 minimum wages, some new polling out on that. We've got a reporter, journalist I really respect, Jan Grillo, who's going to give us an update, sorting fact from fiction of what's actually happening at the border right now. But we wanted to start with Biden making some news last night in his big sit-down interview with George Stephanopoulos.
Yeah, this was a big one. We'll talk about the Cuomo stuff later, which also really caught my eye. But in terms of what's most important here in Washington is what he said about the filibuster. Let's take a listen to that.
But here's the choice. I don't think you have to eliminate the filibuster. You have to do it what it used to be when I first got to the Senate and back in the old days when you used to be around there. And that is that a filibuster, you had to stand up and command the floor. And you had to keep talking alone. You couldn't call for, no one could say, quorum call. Once you stopped talking, you lost that, and someone could move in and say, I moved the question of. So you got to work for the filibuster.
So you're for that reform. You're for bringing back the talking filibuster.
I am. That's what it was supposed to be. The idea, it almost is getting to the point where there's, democracy's having a hard time functioning.
Really interesting comments, Krystal. Obviously, I think comes after Joe Manchin came out and signaled his approval for this. Whether it happens or not, it's really one thing to be seen. But I did some research into this, and I actually think this might be the worst of all worlds, because what they're doing is that they are bringing back the talking filibuster. And I understand the idea that it should be painful. So I looked into when they changed the rules, which, by the way, when our president was still in the Senate, that's how old he is. And what happened is that the reason that the talking filibuster was removed is because whenever you hold command the floor, nothing else can happen. And so they said, okay, we'll make intention for filibuster in order to come forward so that we can continue to have other stuff happening in the Senate. Very routine business. Confirmation of generals. Every general in the United States has to be approved by the Senate. Confirmation of ambassadors, cabinets, sub-cabinet officials. I can go on. Supreme Court, these types of things. People, things you guys generally know about. Well, the problem is that all of that stuff operates off something called unanimous consent orders. Now, you can't have that stuff going on at the same time while there's a filibuster, a talking filibuster. That's why they did away with it in the first place. So McConnell, having come forward, and let's put these tweets up there on the screen from Jake Sherman, basically saying nobody serving this chamber can begin to imagine what a completely scorched earth Senate would look like. What he's talking about there is he was going to object to everything that I'm talking about there, which requires 30 hours of debate on the Senate floor. But what Manchin and Joe Biden are talking about does not do away with the 60 vote threshold. So you still, basically, you're going to erase all of this Senate floor time, and you're not getting the benefit of the 51 vote threshold. So like I said, it's like now the Senate will do less and the power of the filibuster will remain. So in my opinion, either nuke it or don't, because a lot of this is just posturing and people are not informed enough about the process to say, well, hold on a second. Either nuke the damn filibuster and make it 51 votes and then you guys vote and you can change your rules and all of that, or don't, because bringing this back is actually could make Washington work even less than it currently does right now.
So let's take a listen to what Senator McConnell actually said, and then I'll tell you my thoughts about it all on the other side.
So let me say this very clearly for all 99 of my colleagues. Nobody serving in this chamber can even begin to imagine what a completely scorched earth Senate would look like. None of us have served 1 minute in a Senate that was completely drained.
Now, let's be clear. What McConnell is saying there, he doesn't have to make this a scorched earth Senate. That's his threat, right?
Yeah, he's saying he's going to do.
That's what he's saying he's going to do. He says it's going to be child's play. What you see, the tactics we've used in the past are going to seem like child's play. I'm going to make your life miserable now. I'm paraphrasing. That's not literally what he said. But that's what the threat is in his very monotone voice. He's saying, I'm going to make your life miserable. I'm going to make it so the Senate can barely operate. It's child's play, what you've seen from me in the past. Now, the argument in favor of the talking filibuster is basically look, back when there was a talking filibuster, and even all the way up through the 2000s until Barack Obama's terms in office, essentially, the filibuster was used sparingly.
Yes.
It was not routine where every single piece of legislation that ever came to the floor was subject to this 60-vote threshold. Now it's completely routine. The assumption is for every single thing, it's going to be 60 votes. So the idea with the talking filibuster is, well, let's at least make them work for it. Let's make it a little bit harder, and then maybe you won't have them grandstanding filibustering on every single thing, and you push the onus from the majority onto the minority to hold the floor if they really are opposed to something else. And I would also say, look, right now the Senate operates on unanimous consent on all of these things. You could also tinker with some of those rules.
They could change that. That's
They
true.
could undercut some of McConnell's threats here if they tinkered with some of those rules in minor ways that, look, the public is not going to care about. They don't follow the minutia of this. They just want to see senators actually getting things done and delivering on promises made to the American people that they actually want to see. However, all that being said, I tend to agree with your perspective in that it also shows, McConnell is willing to totally go nuclear over any change. Republicans are always willing to play the full hand that they have at their disposal.
And he's going to do it. He actually will do it.
They will use every tool in the toolkit. They will not hesitate for 1 second to make their life miserable in whatever way they possibly can. And meanwhile, Democrats are trying to play around with this half-measure thing that may make things marginally better, may also make things marginally worse. Just get rid of the damn thing. Just get rid of the damn thing. People are not going to punish you for that. In fact, even in Arizona, we covered the poll here in Kyrsten Sinema's home state. She's one of the roadblocks to getting rid of the filibuster altogether. We covered a poll there where people were like, no, obviously I would rather see major legislation go through than hold on to this arcane Senate rule. It's not like this thing is enshrined in the Constitution. It wasn't set down by the founding fathers. None of that. It's just how they've typically done things for the past several decades. And it's changed over time. So it's not even like this version of the filibuster has been in place for decades. It's not that way. It has been changed. They used to have a similar kind of filibuster situation in the House. They got rid of that altogether. So yeah, it's kind of typical Biden that he wants to take the half measure that creates this worst of all worlds situation where Republicans are still going to fully retaliate. They're going to still fully play their hand and use all the power that they have at their disposal, but you're only going to walk half of the way there.
And what the people need to understand is, okay, even if you do have a talking filibuster and you make it painful and then the filibuster ends, all that is that they can call for a vote of cloture, which is that you can move something forward from debate to an actual vote. But cloture takes 60 votes under the current rule. That's really what we're talking about here, is the 60-vote threshold. So if the 60-vote threshold remains, so you have a talking filibuster, and then that makes it painful, and then the measure is still going to fail. So again, if it's you either do 51 or don't. And this is part of the problem where I think people are being gaslit into thinking this would be some dramatic change into the Senate. And it's just not true. If you think that the talking filibuster means a $15 minimum, not even the 3 or 4 Dems support that one. I don't know. Something every single one of the Democrats agree on
HR1,
is going to
let's
HR1, right? Which I don't even know if Joe Manchin agrees on that one. But that being said, if HR1, take that as an example, it still wouldn't pass under a talking filibuster. In fact, you would have long periods of debate taken up for it, and then it would still fail on cloture. The reason that we remember talking filibuster is things like the Civil Rights Act of 1964. The thing is that filibuster mattered because I think it was 81 days that they filibustered because they had the votes in order to make it move forward on cloture. They actually had the 60-vote threshold, so the minority was using it, the 15 senators or whatever against it, was using it to stop it from moving forward. This isn't that case. It's not like that today. It's like they don't actually have 60 votes. The votes are the things that actually matter. So don't think that this would be as big of a change as they're making it out to be.
So we can get lost in all of this, arcane, the parliamentarian, and the cloture and all this stuff. Look, the bottom line is this. If you look throughout history, the presidents who are remembered, who really shift the course of history and deliver for the American people, they do what they need to do to get it done. That's the bottom line. I mean, you look at some of the tactics that FDR used. He went way beyond just changing the rules in the Senate. I mean, he threatened to pack the courts, all that stuff. If it's a popular agenda and you want to get it done, you do what you got to do to get it done. This is a fairly simple, straightforward change that has already been laid out for you because over years the filibuster has been abused and then eroded. It's right there for you, and they only want to take the half step. On H.R. 1, and I actually think this is really significant because this is the real battleground that is being laid out before us right now, because Republicans basically have given up on winning an actual majority of the country.
Yeah, they have.
And so their whole game is, and we've seen this in the wake of the 2020 election, in I think it's like 38 states, hundreds of bills have been introduced to change the voting procedures, to restrict voting in states. They have their eye on the ball on this. Like, we've got to control who's able to vote. In Georgia, they've been going, above and beyond to make sure that what happens to them this time doesn't happen to them again, that it's a lot harder for people to be able to vote, especially as their coalition shifts away from these white, suburban, educated people who are reliable voters. So they understand that's the whole ballgame. H.R. 1 is Democrats' play to try to roll back some of what Republicans have done and enshrine in law some voting rights protections so that they can hold on to their majorities. That is going to be where a lot of the fight unfolds. That is going to be the piece of legislation that I think Democrats are really going to go to mat for, and I think Republicans are really going to go to the mat for. And all this talk about the filibuster is really setting up for that whole conversation, because those are really where the battle lines are ultimately being drawn.
I think that's a good point.
The one last thing I will say here that I want to give credit, we talked to Chuck Rocha about the talking filibuster. He made what was an interesting point, which is like, especially if Republicans are filibustering on things that are really important to the American people that they really broadly support, like a minimum wage, even though they don't have the Democrats on board for that, which is really stupid. But anyway, but if it's something that's really clear that American people really support, at least he said, as an ad maker, I can use that footage of them standing in the way and I can use it to run an ad. Whereas right now it's so easy, it's so simple, it's hard to like pin on somebody, you don't have their comments. So there is at least that in favor of a talking filibuster, but overall, yeah, it's a half measure when you really should just pull the Band-Aid off, do what you want to do, and if your agenda's popular, the American people are going to reward you for it, and if it's not, then they're going to punish you for it, and that's the bottom line.
Like I said, do it or don't. And, they just can't pick. There we go.
All right, we're going to tell you what's on our radars. That's next.